Guys, I Strider coming at you with some more Pokemon content. Today we would like to continue the series, the Pokemon Draft League 101 series, just about kind of improving at the Draft League format in general. And this lesson is, I believe, lesson number 6, and it is all about speed. Speed in Pokemon, for those of you that don't know, essentially, if you're faster in Pokemon, you go first. That's what speed does for the most part. Obviously, there are cases like where someone has a priority attack and they get to bypass that speed, and there's some things like that. But for the most part, that is what we are going to be talking about. Is just speed and how to make sure your teams have a good spread and a good set of speed tiers that make it hard for your opponent to abuse. So, for example, here, and we have 5 examples. We have my team over here, another team from the GBA here, another team from the GBA here, or not the GBA, I'm sorry, I'm not in the GBA. These are from my league, the PDL. These 2 teams are from the GBA Season 6. I just wanted a good spread and different examples to show you and why you can abuse different speeds. So let's just take an example here. You'll see my team has my fastest mon's Jolteon, then Sceptile, and then a fairly big gap. I say fairly big, 120 to 105. It is unfortunately I don't have a 110, just so I can tie other 110s. And then 102, and then 95, and then here's probably the most significant gap in my team is the speed tier between 95 and 80. So what someone could do? Okay, let's just say. Let's see. Let's take an example here. Let's say who could abuse this the best? Okay, right here. The New Orleans Pelipers actually have a 91. So what that means is they don't have to. If they were playing me, there's literally no reason to fully invest in speed, because if I want to be you're never going to be faster than RK9. Now you could play mind games where you're like, well, I don't think he's going to invest any speed in his Arcanine, but I'm going to invest just enough to where I outspeed 0 speed Arcanine, because maybe you expect a defensive Arcanine. But the cool thing you can do, actually, let's take this example. Let's take one of my 80 here. So let's do Mamoswine. And we don't actually care about any of his moves, but let's just put 252. And let's go ahead and go Jolly. So Jolly 252 plus, that's the max speed I could possibly go without putting a scarf on it. And that is puts me at a 284. Now, let's say this Lando, even though probably Lando doesn't really want to fight a Mamoswine too much, but let's just go ahead and take Landorus Therian. So now, in a normal scenario, most of the time, if you wanted to be fast, you would literally dump everything into speed, and you'd go like that, right? And now you are faster than my Mamoswine, but you have a lot of wasted EVs because there's nothing in between Mamoswine and Arcanine that you really like. There's nothing there. You don't need to worry about that speed tier. So what we could do is we could say, what was it again? 284. So we could say, what do we need to be down to? We might actually, honestly, let's take a look at this. Actually, let's say you wanted an attacking one. You could go. You wouldn't be able to do Adamant, but so you'd have to go Jolly. But you wouldn't need that many. You'd probably need like 176. No, 148. Okay, that's too little. 160? Nope, 168. So, actually, does 164 take me all the way down? Yeah, okay. So 168. So now, instead of having to dump all those speed EVs there, we could go ahead and go something like 252, and we could go, and we get to get all this extra bulk. So instead of having 319 health like we would, we actually get to get bumped up to 341. Now this is important because a lot of times people don't calc for this when they're prepping. They will calc for like max speed and max attack, or it's just hard to predict exactly what your opponent's going to try and speed creep, or what what you can actually the amount of hits you can take goes up a lot whenever you just get to start adding this little bulk here and there. So that's just one example of how someone could abuse a speed tier in mine that I have a large gap on. Now, if I had, let's say this Mamoswine was like a Rotom Wash, okay? I believe they're base 86, but now all of a sudden he gets to invest a lot less into bulk if he actually wants to outspeed my Rotom if I decide to dump a lot into it. So I mean he has to put a lot more into speed because there's actually only a 5 speed gap there instead of the 11 base stat speed gap. So again, you can kind of see how that would be relevant. Also, and it's most important to not have those big gaps kind of in the middle. Like you don't want them between, like, I don't know, what's the most important like speed areas? Like probably about 80 to like 110. Anything above that's just going to be like, it's almost like, okay, that's just very fast. Like it becomes less and less relevant the farther outlier you are, because Pokemon speed kind of bunch in the middle there between, I mean, offensive threats are, yeah, probably between like 80 and 110 on average. And now you might have, like, if you even look at all these teams, like this guy has 1 Mon over 135. I have 2. This guy has 2. This is kind of an outlier. He has 3. This guy has 0. So like you can see, you're not going to see a ton of Mons faster than that. And then whenever you start getting to the really low tiers, like 50 and below, a lot of times those Mons are defensive anyways, and so for them it's not as important to go first, because that's really not what they're built for. That's really not what they care about. Like you can see here, like I have a 30, this guy has a 40, like so 30, 40, 20, 30. Like those aren't like that important. Like it's not that important that a Moongus is faster than a Scavalier. I guess it can be, but again, it's not the end of the world. So again, you don't want those large gaps in the middle, is what I'm saying. You want to try to keep a decent, and I think I did an okay job. Obviously, the 95 to the 80, of course, is a little bit unfortunate, but it's not. There's bigger ones, like right here. I personally think this is a pretty big gap right here, 102 to 90. There's a lot of Pokemon with base 100 speed tier. That's actually one of my biggest, what I think is one of my biggest weaknesses about the speed on my team, is that I don't have a base 100. Base 100 is just a very common, it's probably one of the most, if not the most common, just speed stats for like it's like the base almost for like offensive threats that you'll see. And the fact that I don't have that means every 100 on my opponent's team gets to just add a little bit more to bulk, because they know they're never going to be faster than Garchomp if I want my Garchomp to be faster anyways, and my Arcanine could never be fast enough to catch them anyway, so they just get to dip a little bit. And again, the 102 to 90 is kind of a big one, because every single base 100 gets to drop all the way down to the 90 speed tier and just get that little bit more bulk, or maybe they even get to be Adamant instead of Jolly or something, or something like that. So again, that's kind of an important gap, but you see this guy actually covers it. Oh, and this is a big gap too, the 135 to 102. But again, that's not as important. It could be, like, for example, my Jolteon. I could drop my Jolteon speed a lot to if I only had to outspeed Garchomp. Like, let's take a look here. If I had Jolteon, and let's say I'm bringing Hidden Power Ice because I want to beat the crap out of this thing. Let's see, what is max speed? And again, this isn't as important, I don't think, as those middle tiers. But let's just say 252 plus and minus 333. So I could actually, let's say a lot of times I'd be forced to run a Timid maybe on my Jolteon. Now I definitely would most certainly get to run Modest. Let's see, let's take a look here. I'd probably get to run Modest, 252 plus, and like I'm just throwing something out here, and then I would only need to run, like, what is that, like, it's probably like, well, let's see, 100 is probably too much. No, 100 is a little not enough. 333, so I'd probably need, what is this, let's see, what's 200 look like? 200 is way too high. 148, 333. So I could run 152 speed EVs, and then I get an extra 104 into my HP. That makes my Jolteon a lot bulkier than he normally would be. Plus, he maybe hits harder than, let's say, he had something like a Weavile. If I want to outpace a Weavile, I need to be timid. You see what I'm saying? So again, and it's important when you're doing prep to look at these speed tiers of your opponent. And I actually like to lay it out just like this. I will take my team, lay it out, boom, 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 like this. I'll take his team, lay it out like this, and then I can kind of visually, it helps me visualize and see the gaps in my opponent's speed tiers. And plus, it's nice to know who can be the fastest Mon on the game. There's actually, like for example, if I was playing Dizzy Falcon, even though his Sceptile, his Mega Sceptile is 145, I could still be the fastest Mon if I absolutely wanted to be with Jolteon. I could either do like a Quick Feet variant to double his speed. I could run like Quick Feet Toxic Orb or Quick Feet Flame Orb or something, or I could run a Scarf, of course, in order to outpace that Mega Sceptile. And that's kind of important to know. And like same here, like so for example, even how I was saying I'd get to speed creep this Weavile. Well, this Weavile could actually speed creep this Sceptile and just go down a little bit, get that little bit extra bulk. I know this is a pretty simple lesson. It's just something I think is important and I think would help people prep a lot if it's on their mind. Also, I think it might be something nice to have in your mind just while you're drafting. Just kind of be aware of the speeds you have and maybe, oh wow, I have a big gap here, or again, like this gap is like you're like, well, you have a 35 gap here. That's not that important. At some point, Mons are just slow. Like it doesn't even matter. It's like, yeah, he's just really slow. It doesn't actually. It's almost not relevant how fast they are when they're this slow. Of course, that's not true, but I mean, for the most part, defensive Mons fight offensive Mons, and offensive Mons fight defensive Mons. Like those are the things you switch into each other a lot. So it does not really matter when your defensive Mon is that much faster than mine. It is not that important. It can be, but it's not as important as making sure your offensive threats. And then of course there's that next level where you're like, well, if I know my opponent is very good and looks at my speed tiers, and this is risky, so I almost wouldn't recommend doing this. But if you know he's going to speed creep your Sceptile, well, I could actually drop my Jolteon all the way to be one more than whatever, like, because he's going to go one more than Sceptile, so Weavile is going to go one higher than Sceptile, and then I could go down to be one more than what I think that Weavile is going to be. And again, that's risky because if your opponent is just like, screw you, I'm just going to go max speed, then of course that's almost a level that I would be careful playing on, just because you can oops and get yourself in some trouble there. But it's definitely something that it's possible. It definitely can happen. And savvy players will take advantage of that if they catch you. They can kind of catch you off guard. Again, here, like we can look at some of these other gaps. This is like my favorite speed tier one. Like it's so nice. The biggest one is probably 86 to 70, and that is unfortunate. But it's not. It's but I love this 135 to 110, 105, 110, 91, 86. Like that's beautiful for offensive threats. That's like a beautiful little curve right there. But I mean, again, he has a weird gap between 86 and 70, so it's very hard to get this perfect. Even very experienced players, like the GBA, is probably the most competitive league just out there, and even they, it's not uncommon for them to have gaps same as us normal people. And then over here, like you can see, he has the same exact gap as that other individual did, one between 86 and 70, because I believe they both had Rotom. And then, of course, they have a 70 threat here. That's kind of a big gap. And then another gap that's kind of unfortunate is this gap's pretty big. Anything like 105, for example, like my Misdrevious, if I decided I wanted to bring a Misdrevious, or I'm sorry, a Mismagius, I would get to speed creep all the way down to that 95 there. And, I mean, that's some extra bulk that I wouldn't normally have. Now, this case is a little bit interesting. This is a very bulky team that someone on my team, or that someone in my draft drafted, and it honestly has almost no gaps except for the one super obvious one. But I mean, 100 to 95, 83 is like the biggest gap. But it's not that big of a deal. He has one at 81, 80, then 70, 60. Like he just has like a very nice looking curve until you realize he actually has nothing over base 100. Of course, that means like someone like my team or this team kind of gets to feast on that because they can just put like Mega Sceptile gets to be way bulkier than he normally would, simply because, I mean, what is that difference? That's insane. Let's take a look, actually. So they get to go to 328, I'm pretty sure. I'll double check, actually. I'll double check just to be sure. But I'm pretty sure his max speed's going to be 328. 252, yeah, okay. I just wanted to double check. But and then if we go over to Mega Sceptile, and we go, let's take a look at his. So I can literally be, like, let's say I'm obviously a special attacker. Probably I'm going to be modest. I need to put 12 speed EVs, and now I outspeed his entire team. I get to add 252. And then look at all this extra bulk I get. I get 244 in HP. That is a lot of extra bulk that your opponent might not be preparing for when they're prepping, that they need to all of a sudden be like, oh my gosh. Like, that is a big difference. So this is something, I mean, even Weavile gets to go down quite a bit, Azelf, so that's something. And shoot, maybe they're not even worried about, like, honestly, Weavile doesn't even probably care about Flygon speed because it could just run Ice Shard. So it could even go down something to like all the way to 95. Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure a Weavile with Ice Shard is going to come very close to one-shotting a Flygon anyways. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about speed and why it's important to have mixed speed tiers, and you can see now why in your prep you can kind of abuse the gaps. That's kind of what I wanted this to be. Abuse the gaps in your opponent's speed tiers. Sometimes I've seen weird cases where like you have a lot of the same. Like who was it? It was a GVA match this season 6 where like it was kind of a weird match because a lot of their offensive threats almost were like identical, so they almost had to all be max speed in order to keep pace with each other. But for the most part, that doesn't happen, and you can really try to find ways. Like I said, to abuse speed tiers, and then of course there's other things you can do just based on speed. Real quick that I want to touch on. For example, let's say I know Milotic is probably going to be defensive, right? Let's just say I'm okay, right? So I know he's not going to have much speed investment, and let's say I want my or any speed investment essentially, because he's going to be a bunch of defenses and HP. I could go ahead and take my Togekiss and speed creep that by 1, even though technically this Milotic could be faster than my Togekiss. I'm assuming it's defensive. I can go ahead and speed creep it by 1 just by putting like a little. I wouldn't need very much speed investment in there if in order to outspeed it. So I could just put in like it's probably like 8 speed EVs or something in my Togekiss in order to outspeed 0 speed investment Milotic. Just something to play with, guys. I really think that's something you should think about, especially when talking about prep and prepping for teams. Yeah, just because I see sometimes people just completely waste the EVs. Like, well, you don't need, like, again, if this individual was playing this individual, he would need 12 speed EVs to outspeed his entire team, which, again, I mean, that's big. Like, that's a lot in order to that's a lot of extra bulk plus modest, which he wouldn't have had to maybe been able to do if I don't know I had something or that his opponent had something very fast. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to go into, guys. I do appreciate you guys checking this one out. I do hope this helps you. I hope you can kind of see what I'm talking about and just abuse these abuse the gaps. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.